Hi everyone, I hope you're enjoying your snow day. What I wanted to do was go through the problems on the second half of the goldfish activity that we've been working on in class so that you can have those completely answered and ready for me for class on Wednesday. The next time I see you will be next Wednesday, so you have several days to get this done. If you have any questions that I don't particularly answer in the videos, please feel free to send me an email and I'll try to get back to you. So let's start with the coordinate graph. We talked a little bit about this in class, how we need to first set the scale for our graph, and we want to include all of the data that we've collected. So that includes data that's just about 1 ounce, so how much does 1 ounce cost, all the way up to that data that we gathered in problem number 3, which asked us to measure the cost of purchasing 750 ounces of goldfish, which was a lot of crackers, right? So our x-axis in this scenario is going to be the number of ounces. And that's because the cost of all the goldfish depends on how many ounces we buy. If I buy 5 ounces, it's a certain cost. If I buy 10 ounces, it's a certain cost. It's not usual for me to go into a store and say, I'm going to buy $10 worth of goldfish, exactly $10 worth of goldfish, and for the store owner to hand me the amount of ounces that I could purchase for $10. You actually have to purchase it based on the number of ounces. So that's going to be my x-axis. I know that at some point there are 0 ounces for me to purchase, and at some point I go all the way up to 750 ounces. So I need to set an even scale between 0 and 750 to accommodate all the data that I have. Some people wanted to break this down by 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s. I would say it'd be a pretty logical thing to break it down by hundreds and to skip a line in between your data. So if I write that second grid line at 100, and then the fourth grid line at 200, and then the sixth at 300, see what I mean, how I'm skipping 2 lines at a time? That gives me a good reasonable location for me to have a value of 50, right? So even though I'm not counting by 50s, I still have a good reference point to think about that. Remember, I need to accommodate up to 750 ounces in my data, which means I actually need to count further than 750. So on my scale, I'm going to go all the way up to 800. I'm just going to continue to 1,000 to make it a nice even number. Next, I need to set my y-axis, which if my x-axis is ounces, my y-axis is cost. And I need to think about the amount of money that I can spend on the goldfish. So obviously there's a way for me to spend $0. And then I need to look at all the data, and the data that I have has the most expensive cost at $420. And that's if I bought 750 ounces of goldfish made up of the 9 serving packs. So I need to at least make it to $450. Again, we're going to set a nice even scale in order to do this. In this scenario, I might count by 50s, but again, skip those 2 grid lines so that I have a nice reference point for anything that might be an interval or a multiple of 25. So I kind of fill out my grid. So it's 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400, 450, and I'm actually going to go right up to 500 so that I exceed the maximum that I need in my graph. So I've labeled my scale, and I have my axes labeled for ounces and cost, and then I'm just going to put my title across the top, Goldfish. You can be a little more creative with your title, but for my example, we're just going to do this. Now there's 3 different sets of data that you can measure. We're going to measure the purple data, and then we're going to measure the red data, and then we're going to measure the blue data. And in my personal experience, it's good to have multiple colors to keep track of which data is which. So my purple data is going to represent the small bag cost, right? I think that's the bags of Goldfish that are $2 for 6 ounces. My red data is going to represent the 9 packs. And in this case, it is $5 for 9 ounces. And my blue data is going to represent the big box. And that is $7 for 30 ounces. Now I'm writing down the ratio of ounces to dollars right next to my graph just so that I have a nice easy way to follow along. But it's up to you if you want to flip back and forth between your table. I know that you have this on paper, so you can kind of tear your packet apart and make sure that you can see your data as well as the table at the same time. So the small bag that we're going to start with says that for every $2 I can purchase 6 ounces. Obviously, the scale of this grid is much larger than that. So I know, for example, that when I purchase 0 ounces, it's going to cost me $0. And the small bag says I can buy 6 ounces for $2. So instead of writing 6 ounces for $2, I'm going to write 60 ounces for $20. And that's going to help me to actually put a good grid point on my graph. So 60 is about a little over the 50 mark. Should be right about here. And $20 would be a little under the 25 mark, right? So I would drop my first coordinate point right about here. Now if I think about that again, 60 ounces for $20 is equivalent to 120 ounces for $40. So once again, I'm going to look at my grid and figure out that 120 ounces is kind of between the 100 and the 150, and $60 is a little above the 50. So I would plot another point right about here. You only need a few coordinate points to actually draw your line of data. You might want to take one final point, which is at the 750 ounces. My small bag allows me to buy 750 ounces for $247. So when I look at my grid, I can say 750 ounces for $247, a little less than $250. So right about here would be that final point. And now I have a really good reference to connect my dots and draw my first line. So I have that line that goes all the way kind of through here. And a little on your paper, obviously you can use a ruler. I'm trying to be very particular. But you know, if you need to shift your coordinate points in any way, please do. It's not an issue. And make sure that your line is straight, right? This is a linear pattern. So hopefully that gives you an example of how to continue plotting your points. And you should have 3 different lines on your graph, which correspond to the colors in your key off to the side.